In my reflection last week, I introduced the theme of wounds. All of us bear wounds. We know what they are. And I spoke principally about wounds which are inflicted or we receive or we give in our families, our family of origin. I call these primary wounds. Wounds when we were growing up as children or young people in our families. If these wounds, I said, are not faced or not recognized, then they could fester for all of our life. And then we will act out of those wounds in our way of relating with other people. So it's important to face those wounds, to recognize them, to name them. Today I'd like to talk about other types of wounds, wounds we receive outside of the family in our relationships with others, be they relationships in school, whether they be in sports teams or in clubs, whether they be among our friends or at the gym. These are also places where we often experience wounds as we move through life. What are some of those wounds? I'd just like to once again mention briefly, because there's not time to go into each wound, but I want to suggest areas or ways which we may have been wounded or we have wounded others in our relationships. One of those ways, for example, is bullying, mocking another person, could be a classmate, a teammate. Bullying can really do damage to a person, his person's self-image, and that could be a wound that they bear. Similar to that is something when we leave out, somebody is shunned or left out of the groups. They are not taken into consideration. They can feel marginalized. Sharp or derogatory criticisms can really knock down a person's sense of self-worth. The venom of gossip, as Pope Francis calls it, when we talk about another person, when we run the person down or make them feel bad, talking about a person's negative aspects. When we judge others, we become like Pope Francis says, we pretend to be gods. We know what's going on in their mind, what's going on in their life, why they do things, why they say things. Bearing grudges. Sometimes we've been wounded, and we might bear that wound and that grudge for a long, long time. And that can also influence the way that we relate to other people. And finally, one more way is the way we might build fences around our heart to keep people at bay, keep people out. These are just a very few ways in which we may have been wounded or we might wound another person. I invite you during these next days to sit with some of these ideas and ask yourself, how have I been wounded in my relationships with other people? And how have I perhaps wounded others? I'd like to invite you once again to sit in prayer with these, to meditate, to walk with Jesus as the disciples on the road to Emmaus. Open your heart and share your life and your work with Him.